Hi there, everyone, and welcome to Paper Wishes Weekly Webisodes. I'm Sarah Newman, and I'm excited to bring you the 15th episode of Mixed Media the Paper Wishes Way. Today, we're going to play with Ranger's line of Dylusions acrylic paints. I really love paint from Mixed Media, and this range has great quality and so many fabulous colors. Now, if you're thinking about traditional painting with a brush, that's not what we'll do today. In fact, none of the techniques I have to show you involve a paintbrush. Instead, we're going to use some other familiar tools. Now, today's projects will use papers and die-cut elements from the Butter collection from 49 and Market. This has 4 double-sided papers. You can see the designs below, plus 2 sheets of laser cut embellishments. So as you can see, we have a lot to explore today, and I'm really glad that you're joining us. So come play with us. First, let's take a look at our paints. Now, the Dylusions line is brought to us by Ranger signature designer Diane Reevely. And because she developed these paints for art journaling, they dry really quickly to a lovely matte finish. They're easily blendable, they're waterproof, and they come in some really fabulous colors, as you can see here. So I've got 11 paints to show you today, and I figure what I'll do is move these aside and show them to you on my swatch sheet. So let's bring this in. I think you can get a better idea of how these will look when you actually are painting onto white or black cardstock. So as you can see here, we start with white linen. We've got lemon drop, desert sand, mango punch. We go to strawberry daiquiri, tropical sangria, peony blush. We have island parrot, blue Hawaiian, blue lagoon, and balmy night. So beautiful colors and beautiful names. I think Diane may be ready for a tropical holiday with these names, and all kinds of really great versatile colors on here. Now, some you'll notice are translucent. So if you take a look at the strawberry daiquiri, that has a translucency to it, whereas the peony blush is more opaque. And that's going to give you more all-over coverage. This is going to be more translucent. So is the tropical sangria, and it looks also like this beautiful blue Hawaiian will as well. So you've got some versatility with that as well. Now, these come in really nice little flip cap bottles, 1 ounce of paint. And I really like this because while it's nice to have a range of colors, you don't always need a giant tube or a jar of paint of so many different shades. So this is a great way to get a coordinating collection that's not so overwhelming. It's not going to take up a huge amount of space in your crafting area. And it's also a great value. So let's jump right into some demos. I'm going to bring in a piece of plain white cardstock, and I'll be working, let's see, I've got the strawberry daiquiri here. Let's also bring in, maybe we'll do some tropical sangria, and why not also have our balmy night. We're going to do some spattering with this, and we'll do some brayering with this and see what we come up with. Now, each one of these has a little ball in the jar. So you want to shake them until you can hear that mixing ball rattle, and that means that you are ready to go. So I'm going to give these a quick shake. You can hear that rattling ball in there. I'm going to be working onto my craft mat, and this is going to protect my table. It will also serve as my palette. I'm going to bring in my brayer. Now this is Ranger's Mini Brayer. And I will confess, I've got a couple of these on my work table. It's one of my most used tools for mixed media. And this is going to give me the fastest, easiest way to add paint onto my surface. Unlike using a brush, it will apply the paint in a thin layer that will dry quickly. Okay, so I'm going to start out first with my strawberry daiquiri. And I'm just going to put a little bit here onto my craft sheet. And I'll roll my brayer through here and then just simply brayer it onto my white cardstock. So immediately I've got some beautiful color on here. I'm going to let some of that white show through because I still really like that coming through. And then let's see, I'll get my tropical sangria. And I'm just going to add a little bit here as well. I'm not bothering to clean off my brayer in between. And I'm just going to add some of this color on here. Bright, vivid, really a lot of fun. Okay. Now, if this is too bright for your project, don't forget you can always tone things down with a little bit of white. So we've got the white linen here. Give that a shake. And I'll just add a little bit on here. So you can see having the flip top lids also gives you some nice control over how much paint you're using. So here we go. I'm just toning this back and muting it a little bit. So the white is probably one of the most versatile and handiest paints to have in your collection. Okay, so I'm going to add in a little bit of contrasting color. Just going to clean this up quickly from my craft mat and bring back in my Balmy Night. Now, I could leave this as it is because it looks really nice, but let's see what happens when I add a little bit of that Balmy Night on top. Now, instead of brayering it on, I'm going to bring in another familiar tool. This is the Distress Splatter brush, and I'm going to splatter some of this beautiful kind of a serge blue paint onto my brayered background. Before I do that, though, I always like to add a little bit of water just to make this a bit more watery consistency. So I'm just mixing this with my splatter brush and getting it onto the tips of my splatter brush and then splattering this on top. So I can add as much or as little as I want. I often like to turn the piece as I'm doing this so that I don't have all of my splatters going in one direction. And there we go. Okay, let me again just quickly clean this up. You see how great the craft mat is for something like this. And now I have a really fun brayered, splattered, painted background. Now, because the paint has been applied with the brayer and again with the splattering brush, it's not such a heavy layer that will take a long time to dry. So this will take just a couple of minutes and then I am ready to use it on one of my projects. Okay, so one other variation that I have on this is using some other colors. So I'm going to show you this. This one is using the Island Parrot, Blue Hawaiian, and Blue Lagoon, and then splattering that with the Balmy Night. So you can see you can get some really, really different effects, just depending on the paint colors, but you can use the very same techniques. Now, I think it's time for us to take a look at some of the projects that we can do with this technique. Here's one. It's a cute little tag in a bag, and I have a lot to show on this one for you, but you can see the brayering on here, this little piece of cardstock that I've wrapped around this fun little tag. So let's take a look at how to put this together. Let's take a closer look at our little tag in a bag and how this is all put together. Now, I pointed out that my brayered splattered piece has been wrapped around the front of this little pocket, and I also edged it with a bit of desert sand paint before doing that. You can see on the back that I've just got it secured. The seams are lining up with the seam on my little pocket. And then I have my decorated tag just right inside. So let's take a look at the tag in a bag, which I think is just such a fun surface to work with. So this is a cutting die. And as you can see, you're going to get the pocket and you'll also get the tag. Now, the bag or the pocket is going to measure 3 inches by 5 1/4 when it's all folded up, and the tag will fit just perfectly inside there. So when you open up your package, you will have 2 of the dies that go together. Simply run these through your die cutting machine. Any one of your die cutting machines will do the trick. And then you will have pieces that look like this. Now, I've just die cut this from plain white cardstock so that you can see how easy it is to simply reinforce those scored lines and then just secure that with a little bit of adhesive. Now, I like to use the extra sticky tape for this. I find that it holds it really well. And then you're ready to decorate. So I've got one that I've die cut from the Butter collection. And you can see here I've got some really beautiful collage patterning on here, and I could leave this as is if I wanted to, but I do want to add a little bit more color to it. Now, the colors that I'm working with are desert sand. I've also got the island parrot, one of my favorites. And to tone these down and give them a bit more of a distressed look, I've worked in some of the white linen. Now, rather than painting this on, I'm going to use a piece of cut and dry. Now, cut and dry is from Ranger. This is a foam pad. It comes on an 8-inch by 10-inch sheet, and I just cut mine down with scissors so I have little pieces to work with. You've got kind of a sturdy black or gray piece on here, and then the other side is this white sponge, and this is what I use to apply my paint. Okay, so I'm going to move these aside. I'll move aside my tag for now, and I want to give a bit of a distressed edging on here. I want it to look a little bit green, but not quite so bright green. So again, using my craft mat as my palette, I'm going to put a little bit of that island parrot on there, and then also just a bit of the white linen. So what I'll do first is pick up some of the parrot and just edge along the side here. And you can see that that's pretty bright. So what I'll do then to tone it down is just pick up a bit of the white linen, and I'm just gently kind of whisking this on. I wanted it to kind of come from the edge of the piece and fade into the surface. So there we go. So you can see how nice that looks and how subtle. Now, if I wanted to also add a little bit of green going directly on the edge, that'll give me some nice contrast as well. So that's how easy it is to use the cut and dry with this. Now that's with the two, the green and the white. Let's take a look at how to add a much more vintage look using the desert sand. So I'm just going to put a little bit of desert sand on here and maybe top up my white linen a little bit, add just a little bit more there. Now, I can use a new piece of cut and dry, but I'm going to make the most out of this one and just flip it over so I'm using the other side. And again, very same process. Here's the desert sand on there, maybe a little bit darker than what I would like. So I'll just pick up some of the white linen and just blend it on top. Now you can blend the two of them together before you apply it on here, but I find this method works just as easily. And again, just kind of blending this color onto the front. It's a really nice soft application process. Okay, so then there we go. We've got a little bit more color on here. And again, I could add some more edging as well. Now, as with our brayering, this is going to dry really quickly, so I don't need to wait too long for it to dry. If I'm impatient, I can also use a heat tool just to speed up that dry time. So don't forget, as you're working with so many different, beautiful, fun colors, you do have the option to mix your own. So this is a really nice way to add a different effect. Now let me bring back in my tag in a bag and we'll take a closer look at this. So I've got my piece wrapped around the front. I've also got some of the elements from the butter collection that I've just added onto the front. So the sentiment as well as the butterfly in this botanical piece. Now, when I pull this out, you can see that I've got my message. It's a dazzle, of course, and this is on one of the oval scallop die cuts, which means that I've got some really fun extra dimension on here. Now, even though this is slightly wider than the tag, it will still fit into my pocket. Got another butterfly and some more of those additional embellishments as well. Now, I really like this. I think it makes a fun alternative to a card. Also, if you are doing gift cards or money gifts, this is also another really nice way for the presentation. Now, I've got one more card that is showing some simple brayering. So this card uses the island parrot once again and the tropical sangria. These have both been brayered onto white cardstock, and then I brayered white linen, quite a lot of white linen on top, which is going to give this a much softer effect. So I've got my green paper down, I've got my pink paper on top, and then I've got kind of a blended combo as a third element on here. Now on the inside, speaking of our splattering, I've splattered that Sangria, the paint, right across the inside of my card. Now I've also got another brayered piece on here. This is another one of the oval cutting dies as well. Now if we look at the card focal on here, you can see this is a painted chipboard piece. This is also using Island Parrot and Tropical Sangria, but this has been undiluted by the white linen, which gives us some really bright, bold color. And this has been done on some scrapbooking chipboard pieces, which is another fun way to add a painted effect to our cards. So let's take a look at how we can create that. This is how my chipboard piece will look before I get to altering it. So these, as I mentioned, are from the Polish company Scrapbooking, and they really specialize in creating lovely and intricate laser cut chipboard embellishments. And they have kind of a steampunk look to them, which I really love. Now they come in a nice neutral color, which means you can easily add mediums like paint to personalize them. And that's what I've done here. Now this one in particular is a layering chipboard piece. So the two wings that you see here will be layered on top of the base piece. And that's what I've done to create my focal image. So let's take a look at how to easily add some paint on here. Now all you need to do is pop these elements out of the chipboard backing. But when I'm painting, I just find it sometimes is easier to keep everything in that chipboard piece so that they're not kind of flying all over the place. But because I want to use two different colors, and for this I think I'll use the blue Hawaiian and I will also use the desert sand just to give us a different look. So I think I'll do desert sand on the base piece and blue Hawaiian on the wings. But when I'm doing this, I'm going to just use some sticky notes to kind of mask off the areas that I'm not painting right away. So I'm just going to pop these down here. And here's one more. And there we go. So I've got everything pretty much masked off. Now let's see. I think I was going to do desert sand for this base piece. So once again, just working onto my craft sheet, I'll decant a little bit of that on there. And then I'm just going to once again use my cut and dry for this. Now, I find that this is easier and a little bit less messy than using a brush. And I also find, especially with some of those really intricate areas, that when you use a brush, it tends to kind of glom into some of those detail areas. So that's why I really like using a piece of cut and dry for this purpose. And all I need to do is just kind of pat that on there. Now, once again, because I'm not using a lot of paint, this will dry pretty quickly. I tend to leave everything in place and then I can remove these sticky notes. And I generally use them just to mask off of this area over here. But let's see if we can be really, really careful and add a little bit of our blue Hawaiian. Okay, so I'll pick this up with my cut and dry as well. And here's where you can really see some of that beautiful detail work on here. So one coat is pretty much going to do it. If you want to add some more intense color, of course you can add a second layer of paint. But this paint has some really nice coverage, so one coat will pretty much do the trick. Okay, so I was able to keep those as separate as I can. Now all I need to do is just let this air dry for a couple of minutes and I can pop out those different elements. Okay, so let me bring back in my card, and once again you can take a look. You can see the difference too, what you can achieve in just using your different paint colors here. But as you can see, we've used the parrot for the background here and then the tropical sangria for our piece up here. I have a little dazzle button that's just right in the center just to kind of create a focal element on here and a little bit of a ribbon, and you have a really nice and easy focal element. Again, using some of the oval scalloped pieces, some dies, using also the butter collection on here and a little bit of white cardstock for extra contrast. Okay, so now that we've seen some really simple painting techniques, let's mix our media a bit more and add in some texture paste. Before we move into our last technique of mixing our paints with texture paste, I did want to show you my completed embellishment here now that this is all layered up, and just point out once again how different these two will look just based on the different paint colors that you're working with. So I really think it offers you such a huge variety of versatility. You can go from something a bit more muted and distressed to something bright and bold, just depending on your paint colors. Okay, I'm going to move these to a side, and then I'm going to bring in my next card project to show you. Now, this one here, you can see I was able to create a really lovely background element using texture paste that has been colored with paint. Now in mixed media number 14, we talked about tinting our texture paste with dye ink, and the process for tinting it with paint is pretty much the same. So we're going to take a look at this. Now I'm again working with my Ranger Opaque Matte Texture Paste. Again, also working onto my craft sheet. So what I'll do here is just decant a bit of this onto my craft sheet using my palette knife. Now Paulette sent me a message the other day saying that it looks like I need a new palette knife. Probably either that or a cleaner one. So I tend to agree with her on that. I think it may be time for a bit of an upgrade there. Okay, so for tinting our texture paste, let's use a little bit of the peony blush for this. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this again on my craft sheet, and using my palette knife, I'm just going to blend the colors together. So here we go. It's really pretty quick and easy to do. It still maintains the nice texture of that texture paste. And now I'm ready to use this. Now I've got a piece of white cardstock with a stencil already secured down using a bit more of that hunky-dory stencil tape. And I'm just going to apply this right through the stencil. Now the stencil is the Flourish design from Lavinia, and this is going to give me a really nice, beautiful background. So I'm just going to apply this right onto my piece, scraping it on, and I'll work it in a little bit with my finger. Make sure I get these areas here. And then I'm going to bring in, of course, my stencil pal. And this is going to give me a really beautiful, smooth look. Okay. Now, of course, on my stencil pal, I'm picking up a lot of that extra, which I could just scrape right off and maybe add it down here at the bottom. Okay. And then just scrape it going the other direction. And I really find the stencil pal is invaluable for getting a really smooth effect, especially when you're working with your texture paste. Okay, now I'm going to set this aside and then just gently lift off my stencil and take a look. So I've got not only that beautiful color on there, but also that beautiful pattern. And when this dries, which won't take very long, I'm going to have a gorgeous background. Okay, now I'm going to swoop up some of this excess texture paste. Of course, in real life, I would be putting this to use on something else, but for now, I'll just kind of get that out of the way. And I'm going to bring back in my card, and we can take another look at this. So here I've used my stenciled piece as a background for this painted heart. Now the heart is another Scrapbooking chipboard element, so it's going to come looking like this. Very fine detail on here, beautiful effect. And originally I painted that using my cut and dry with Mango Punch, Strawberry Daiquiri, and also the Peony blush. Turn that around so you can see it. And as you can imagine, it was pretty bright. So of course, I was able to tone that down with a little bit of desert sky and also a little bit of white linen. So all of these combined together have created this really lovely and elegant little heart on here. Quick and easy to do. Now the border that you see on here is a laser cut from the Butter collection, and I simply brayered that with desert sand. Now in the background here you can see I've splattered Balmy Night across the entire card front. So it's not only on the cardstock piece, but it's on the card front itself. A little bit of ribbon and then another element from the Butter collection is on the front of my card. Now for the card inside, I have another bit of the flourish stencil piece on a tag. So yes, this is the tag in a bag, out of the bag. And as you can see, it makes a really nice card focal as well. I've got some more dazzles on here as a greeting and put up onto some oval cutting dies. So with this last card project, I think we've seen just how versatile those Dylusions paints are and how much fun they are to use as well. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for being a part of the Paper Wishes family. We're really glad that you're here with us. I can't wait to see what you create, so do be sure to leave a comment. We love to hear what you think. Each item can be purchased separately, and you can see them below. However, we've also bundled them into a creative money saver just for you. For the money saver, just see this webisode on paperwishes.com.